Hello. So, we've got a lot of interesting news that is coming out all the time about the post office scandal, but I thought it was worth doing a bit of a recap on Henry Staunton, who was the chairman of the post office, who was recently dismissed by the government from his role. And if we go back to that, originally on the 28th of January, so a few weeks ago now, Chairman Henry Staunton had to go as it wasn't working, said Kemi Badenoch, who's currently the government minister in charge of the post office. So the post office chairman was sacked because it just wasn't working, the business secretary says. Kemi Badenoch told the BBC that Henry Staunton's departure was about more than just a Horizon scandal in the wake of the public outcry over the wrongful convictions of sub-postmasters. You might remember when Jo Hamilton was interviewed about this on TV, she said this was the dead cat that the government was throwing out there to try and deflect attention. Ms Badenoch said she removed him after concerns about post office government and the entire business model. Now, notice the language that they use in. She was finally pressed on to whether she dismissed him. They constantly want to say removed him, agreed to leave, but essentially he was dismissed. Mr. Staunton left the role, which he'd been appointed to in December 2022, so well after a lot of all the prosecution happened because they stopped him in 2019, and he was approached for comment. He's not really said a lot recently until today. The post office confirmed in their own statement that Mr. Staunton had been asked to go by Ms. Badenoch. When she appeared on Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg, Ms. Badenoch said that it was difficult for someone to be asked to stand down from a position, but she continued, I decided, given all the difficulties the post office is having, it's not just about Horizon, it's about the entire business model, how we make it work, that we need someone who could chair a board that was able to deal with these things effectively. So obviously the suggestion is here that he can't deal with those things effectively. She explained that one of her priorities was the governance of the post office and said, that was where my deciding that we needed a new chair of the organisation was important. It just wasn't working. Ms Badenoch added that there were various disagreements within the board, and when I looked at it, I thought change of personnel was what was required. She declined to rule out further personnel changes when appearing on Sky's programme and referred to difficulties with other board members. Doesn't sound like she's a big fan of the post office at the moment. Obviously, when we go into other matters there, she declined to set a deadline delivering full compensation, pretty much parroting what Rishi Sunak has said, and she says setting a deadline is not the priority. Well, I think if we speak to the sub-postmasters, they would actually say that it very much is a priority. They have nothing. They've already been waiting too long. What more must they wait for? So the position of chair of the board of post office has a salary of up to 150,000, and he had been tasked with leading the board of directors and working to right all the wrongs of the Horizon dispute. Kemi Badenoch then hit the news headlines again when it says that she failed to raise the Horizon scandal when she met Fujitsu at Davos, which was a bit strange. So she failed to raise the issue of the Horizon scandal or compensation, which Paul Patterson, Fujitsu Europe CEO, had said that they had a moral obligation to contribute to when she met Fujitsu at Davos, instead of focusing on asking the firm for its view on investing in the UK. Well, it certainly wants government contracts by the looks of it, doesn't it? But Henry Staunton has today come out after a period of silence saying that actually, she's saying that I wasn't actually doing a lot, Kemi Badenoch, but he has now said that the government told him to delay compensation for postmasters until after the election. Henry Staunton said he shot it back, saying I'm having no part of it, it's not the right thing to do. So is this part of the disagreements that Kemi Badenoch is alluding to here? So it says Labour has demanded answers after the former chairman of the post office said he was told to stall on compensation for sub-postmasters ahead of the general election. I mean, if this is true, this is absolutely shocking, using the sub-postmasters compensation as a bit of a political football to say, actually, we want to get this to be the next government's problem, because I would anticipate that they are expecting not to be in government. In the dramatic new development in the scandal, Henry Staunton, who was ousted last month after less than a year in the role, said he'd been told to allow the Tories to limp into the next election. But the business secretary, Kemi Badenoch, hit back accusing him of lies and said that he had been removed from his post because of concerns over his conduct. Now, they're changing their story a bit now, because it's saying it's disagreements. Now they're saying they're concerned over his conduct, now that he's launching allegations at them. She sacked him last month amid increasing public pressure after an ITV drama highlighted the appalling miscarriage of justice, where hundreds of postmasters were wrongfully prosecuted over a decade, and half because of faulty IT software called Horizon. The estimated final compensation bill is now around £1 billion, and I would imagine it would continue to rise further. In an extraordinary intervention, Mr. Staunton, the former boss of W.H. Smith, said a senior civil servant suggested holding back compensation ahead of the election. He told the Sunday Times, "Early on in the role, I was told by a fairly senior person to stall on spend on compensation and on the replacement of Horizon to limp in quotation marks. I did a file note on it, limp into the next election." So he's obviously thought this was significant when he said at the time, because he's made sure he's noted it down. And that is really, would be a disgraceful thing to say, wouldn't it? I mean, we have to take his word that this was what was said. But in terms of the replacement of the Horizon system, we know Fujitsu have recently been awarded a contract extension for Horizon. So it would link into with some of the other things that we do know. It was not an anti-postmaster thing, it was just straight financials. I didn't ask because I said, I'm having no part of it. I'm not here to limp into the election. It's not the right thing to do by the postmasters. Well, he is right in that. And the fact that actually they're saying, actually, they can wait, why shouldn't they wait? We're just talking about the financials here, and the fact a general election comes up shows no ounce of compassion or empathy or thought for justice if this is what's been suggested to him. And part of it does make you wonder if this was part of the reason why he was dismissed. The word limp gives you a snapshot of where they were. Ms Badenoch is expected to make a statement to MPs on the issue on Monday. She hit back at the claims, which the government has denied in a lengthy post on X, formerly known as Twitter. She said his comments in an interview were a disgraceful misrepresentation of my conversation with him and the reasons for his dismissal. Henry Staunton had a lack of grip getting justice for subpostmasters. The serious concerns over his conduct were the reasons I asked him to step down. That he chose to run to the media with made-up anecdotes and a series of falsehoods confirms I made the correct decision. She said her call with Mr. Staunton was with officials who took a complete record. He has given an interview full of lies about our conversation accused during his dismissal. The details will emerge soon enough, as I won't let the matter rest here, but we'll be discussing with government lawyers, she added. Well, if they've got proof to the contrary, I'd say now is the time to put it out to the public so that they can decide on this. A government spokesperson added, "We utterly refute the allegations." So that's where we're at the moment. And it's saying that ministers here are strongly denying the claims by the Post Office chair that the government wanted to stall compensation payouts to victims of the Horizon scandal so the Conservatives could limp into the general election. I mean, overall, if this has been said, it's an absolute disgrace. I mean, they shouldn't be thinking about the timing of the next general election, although one of my fears was they don't want it to be an election issue, and I discussed this in early January. And therefore, any chance they have to bury it, note the government is being as quiet as it possibly can regarding this, which then ties into Kemi Badenoch not discussing the issue with Fujitsu, according to the disclosure from a recent Freedom of Information request to the government. And it would be such a cynical move, especially considering what they've already gone through. It would be a cynical move to make at any time, but knowing the plight of the submasters and the public outrage with how this has been handled, this would surely be something that, actually, far from keeping it away from being an election issue, would be more likely, now it's been discovered, to propel itself into the face of being an election issue. We'll have to wait to see what the government puts out to make a full decision on what was said. But clearly we've got two very, very different stories here, and there seems to be bits of the story, specifically the reasons for Henry Staunton's dismissal, changing subtly but somewhat in Kemi Badenoch's latest statement. So one would think that the best thing to do in this situation would be to put out the documents she's apparently saying that the government have disproving this, because again, to suggest the stalling of Post Office Horizon scandal payouts for people that have been literally bankrupted, have been financially ruined, who've been waiting in some cases decades now because there's an election coming up, would be totally unforgivable. And I'm not so sure that there's many people in the public who would actually understand it either.